In a time when the wind spoke in riddles and the stars mapped the fates of kings, a child was born in the heart of Edirne. They named him Mehmed. It was 1432, but in the nursery of the palace, time felt ancient. He was not a child of loud laughter, but of quiet gazes. While other princes played with wooden swords, Mehmed sat at the feet of the grey-bearded ulama. He walked through a forest of languages, Arabic, Persian, Greek, Latin, learning to speak to the ghosts of the past and the kings of the horizon. His mentors, like the sage Akshamsuddin, did not just teach him math and logic. They planted a seed in his soul. They whispered of a city made of gold and marble, a city that had stood since the world was young, waiting for a key that only one hand could turn. The weight of this destiny was a cloak he wore before his shoulders were broad enough to carry it. He studied the heavens, watching the celestial bodies move in their cold, perfect orbits, realizing that to rule the earth, one must first understand the harmony of the spheres. The crown came too early, like a summer frost. At 12, he was sat upon the throne, a boy among wolves. He saw the doubt in the eyes of his ministers. He felt the cold breath of betrayal. When his father, Murad, returned to take back the sword of state, Mehmed did not cry out. He stepped back into the shadows. This was his dark forest. For years in Manisa, he lived in a silence that was not empty, but full of sharpening steel. He watched the tides. He learned that power is not a shout, but a long, steady breath held in the dark. He felt the sting of humiliation, but he did not let it burn him. He let it temper him. He became like the Damascus steel of his blade, folded 1,000 times, heated in the fire of exile, until he was unbreakable. When the news finally came that his father had passed into the light, Mehmed mounted his horse. He did not ride to a palace. He rode toward a dream that had been haunting him since the cradle. Then came the year of the Great Silence, 1453. The city of Constantinople sat upon the water like a crown of stone, its walls rising from the earth like the knees of giants. For 1,000 years, these walls had laughed at the vanity of men. But Mehmed brought a different music, the thunder of the great cannons. These were not mere weapons, they were iron monsters that breathed the fire of a new age, shaking the bones of the earth. The most poetic of his deeds, however, was born of a miracle. When the iron chain of the Golden Horn blocked his path by sea, Mehmed did not despair. In the deep of night, under a moon that seemed to hold its breath, he commanded his ships to walk. With thousands of men and oxen, he hauled his fleet over the rugged hills, greased logs singing under the hulls. By dawn, the impossible had happened. The ships had glided over the earth and into the water like ghosts. On the final morning, before the sun broke the horizon, a profound silence fell over the camp. Mehmed stood alone. He was no longer just a man. He was the bridge between what was and what would be. When the walls finally breathed their last and the breach was made, he did not enter with a scream of conquest, but with the gravity of a man returning home to a house he had seen in his dreams. Once the smoke cleared, the legend of the warrior softened into the wisdom of the sage. He looked at the great church, the Hagia Sophia, and did not see an enemy's temple, but a jewel of the human spirit. He reached out his hand to the scholars of Italy, the painters of the West, and the poets of the East. He transformed his city into a garden where many faiths could bloom. He sat in his library, a man who spoke 6 tongues, debating the nature of the soul with priests and the secrets of the stars with astronomers. He was a sultan who wrote poetry under the name Avni, the helper, hiding his crown beneath the verses of a lover. He built a world where the call to prayer mingled with the bells of the merchants. A city that belonged to everyone because it was governed by a mind that belonged to the ages. As the years lengthened, the Sultan of 2 Seas became a figure of myth. His campaigns took him to the borders of the world, but his eyes always seemed to be looking further, past the horizon of the maps. In the spring of 1481, while on a journey toward a destination known only to him, the fire in his blood began to dim. He did not die in the roar of battle, nor in the chaos of a broken city. He faded quietly, like a candle's flame when the wax is spent. He left behind no mere empire of land, but an empire of the mind. He closed the door on the Middle Ages and walked through into the light of the modern world. Today, when the mist rolls off the Bosphorus and the sun hits the domes of Istanbul, they say you can still hear the echo of his ships walking over the hills. A reminder that for those who dream with the focus of a star, nothing is impossible.